What is up, guys? In today's video, we'll be talking about a massive, never-ending heat dome and a huge uptick in severe weather that is on the way. Let's get right into this video. So if we talk about what's going on with this major heat, like this is unprecedented, guys, this historic amount of heat we've been seeing in the western and central US lately. We saw the hottest temperature ever recorded in March in Arizona, which was like 112 degrees or something, never ever seen before. It's the hottest temperature ever recorded in the United States in the month of March, and this is due to this massive death ridge just sitting over parts of the west coast, bringing just extreme heat to most of the U.S. This is like, if this continues, this is going to be the hottest March on record in the United States. And just look at this huge amount of heat across the U.S. We might see some changes to a little bit more cold. I think this ridge is going to finally start to weaken once we get into the start of April. And once that huge ridge in the west coast starts to weaken, that's when I'm thinking we're going to start to have severe weather start to brew across much of the central, the midwestern part of the U.S., as it's really going to start to shift into much of the central U.S. We've also been seeing a lot of cold in the northeast, but this ridge is going to move more towards the northeast, and we'll probably switch to more warmer weather there. But this is really what we're looking at, guys. A lot of heat. Never-ending heat. If we look at the temperature anomalies here, it's just extremely above average temperatures in basically all the western U.S. We're seeing almost 40-degree above average temperatures in parts of the western U.S. Arizona, Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, California, all these areas, just extreme heat, and it's like never-ending heat in these regions too. We will finally see a blur of it, but it really is just a lot of heat that's like never-ending in much of these areas. It's pretty dang insane. And then if you look at the northeast just doesn't really get hit by the heat very much. Look at the areas in the northeast. They get a little bit of the heat, but those cold blasts from Canada just keep pluming into the northeast, and it doesn't affect. That huge ridge does not affect the northeast. The northeast stays cold no matter what. That's one thing we've had with the trend recently, is that this winter has been really cold in the northeast and really hot in the western U.S. In the northeast, it's going to continue with much below average temperatures going into the start of March likely, but we're definitely going to still be seeing those much above average temperatures. We might see a little bit of a cold blast come through on Friday from a cold front, but a lot of heat in much of the U.S. that's going to be happening, and more of an active pattern. And the Climate Prediction Center is literally hitting right at this, showing this huge area of heat across much of the western U.S., and then look at the northeast. The northeast stays cold. It stays cold in the northeast for a long time. Look, it's still below average temperatures in the northeast. This huge heat dome across the U.S. is not affected. And if we go to the 8 to 14-day outlook, still parts of the northeast are still cold, but that ridge really starts to shift. We're going to see that ridge mainly predominant in the western U.S., and it's going to start to shift more to the central U.S. once we get into the start of April. And if what you do notice is the pattern for precipitation is definitely a lot lower. We're not seeing as much rainfall. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit. We're not seeing as much rainfall right now. But if you look at the 8 to 14-day outlook, once we get into the start of April, we're starting to see a big area of above average precipitation in the central U.S. that's going to start to go in, and that's probably going to introduce us to a much bigger severe weather threat once we get into the start of April, which is going to be combined by much above average temperatures in the central U.S. and basically the entire U.S. seeing much above average temperatures. And they're hinting that this is going to continue through weeks 3 to 4, April 14th through the 17th of April. This above average temperatures is going to continue for the central U.S., and we're going to see this much above average precipitation trend continue for much of the central and southern U.S. areas, which is going to hint at that severe weather threat. And this is why the Climate Prediction Center is showing these big changes. It's been very dry. Enjoy the dry weather right now in the central U.S. It's feeling really nice in the central western, basically the entire U.S. except for the northeast, seeing some really nice warm weather and not much rainfall. But get ready, because once we get into the start of April, it's going to be a rainy one. It's going to be very dry in the western U.S. once we get into the month of April. Very dry is what we're looking at in the western U.S. Look at Nevada. We're seeing much below average temperatures and a lot of below average precipitation. Sorry about that. And much above average temperatures with this. But look at this. The central U.S. way above average precipitation, which is going to hint at that severe weather threat that's probably going to happen in much of the Midwest throughout the month of April. I do think it's going to be a very active month for these areas in April, and a very warm month too for a lot of the U.S. Now, if we talk about the weather for today, we do have an enhanced risk of severe weather in effect across Pennsylvania, parts of Ohio, and northern West Virginia areas. This does include areas like Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Morgantown areas, and a slight risk of severe storms in the yellow. That does include Indianapolis, Columbus, Dayton, Cincinnati, Philadelphia areas, Allentown, as we could see some supercells definitely fire, especially in the enhanced risk area later today. That is going to produce some very large hail and damaging winds with this. The wind probability is a significant risk for winds, so 75 miles an hour winds could be possible with this system. Anywhere in that hatched area, in that red area, and then anywhere in the red and yellow areas could see some strong damaging winds. And if you look at the hail potential, this whole black hatched area does mean we could see the potential for hail above 2 inches in diameter, and that 30% areas where we have the highest probability of significant hail across Pittsburgh areas, where supercells will develop and bring that definite potential for hail and wind damage. Now, the tornado threat is very low with this, only a 2% chance of tornadoes. It doesn't mean it's non-zero, but it is possible. We could see an isolated tornado from Bloomington all the way over to Harrisburg and Pittsburgh and Columbus and Cincinnati areas. Now, it's not really likely we do see a tornado out of this, but it is possible, and don't let your guard down just in case. But these storms will likely be very elevated in nature, meaning that it's going to be very hard for these things to start rotating and produce a tornado. Even though it's going to be supercells, it's going to be very hard for these things to start to produce a tornado. But it definitely is not out of the question, so if you aren't anywhere in these light green areas, just know what you're doing. Have a plan, be prepared just in case a tornado does happen. It's not out of the question, but it's not very likely, so if nothing happens, then don't expect it to happen. So just, it's possible. Now, I couldn't get the best angle of this, but the storms will first start to develop here probably around the 5 p.m. hours across parts of northern areas of Pennsylvania, where supercells will start to develop and definitely pose a risk for very large hail and damaging winds. I do think we're going to see a very large hail threat come out of this as these storms do develop and pose that risk for hail damage as they move to the east. And then they will fade away, and we will see an additional line of storms start to develop across parts of Ohio and Indiana areas around the 8 p.m. and Illinois areas around the 8 p.m. hours as they will shift to the south. And I do think these will pose risk for some isolated damaging winds and an isolated hail threat too if some supercells do develop ahead of this thing, including areas around 9 p.m. and 10 p.m., including areas like Cincinnati, Indianapolis, areas that could be under the risk for this severe weather threat. So definitely be prepared if you are in any of those areas, as severe weather will be possible from the afternoon hours into the late evening hours tonight. Now, the first more farther out severe weather threat that we are watching, obviously we're going to see a big uptick in severe weather, but we can't really get into details for much. But we do have the isolated risk for some severe weather. We will have a little bit of moisture, a plume of moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico. And at the same time, we've got some very dry air from the south. So this is one of those things where we don't have a cold front coming in from the east like this. We'll have a crashing cold front. So our warm front, our warm moist air down here, and then a crashing cold front moving south into much of these areas. If you look at the miles, look, that cold front crashes down. Look, it goes all the way from Missouri all the way down into Florida. It crashes down, and that will pose an isolated severe weather threat on a Thursday. Now, there's not much specifics toward this, but we will have a good amount of instability that will pose a risk of severe weather probably around this area in Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. It might be further north or further south. We really don't have much details on this, and there will be a lot more changes in the future as we get closer to this thing, because this is still 5 days out. This is Thursday, it's Sunday, and this is Thursday, so we'll get more details on this, but there definitely could be a prominent severe weather risk from the system. Now, this isn't looking like some massive severe weather threat, some huge tornado outbreak or anything, but there could be some isolated severe storms, so we definitely are watching this system as for what it could do on Thursday. So definitely be prepared for that on Thursday, and we'll get more details once we get closer to this thing. Alrighty, I hope you guys did enjoy today's video. That massive heat dome just sitting over most of the western coast of the U.S. being extremely warm, very rare summer-like temperatures in March, and that's going to not end for a very long time. But that ridge will start to shift over to the east, and we're going to see some more severe weather and a lot more precipitation. The weather pattern is going to get a lot more active once we get into April across much of the U.S. More severe weather likely from the system, and that cold is just sitting over the northeast, never ending, and you do have that severe weather threat today across much of the Ohio Valley. Thanks for watching today's video, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and bye, everybody.